Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon from India, and welcome everyone joining from all over the globe. Welcome to this webinar on local to regional, integrating and scaling nature-based solution and disaster risk reduction. I'm Nitish from Youth for Resilience. Today, we are united here to exchange knowledge, strategies, and insights on leveraging nature-based solution for enhancing disaster resilience across South Asia. Our convenient for this event is Youth for Resilience, Women for Water Partnership, Global Water Partnership South Asia, SaciWATERs, Impacting Youth. We welcome all of them. Today we will start with learning more about the webinar, Signpost to Bali, and why we are here. For this, I'd like to invite Ms. Kusum, Chairperson, Global Water Partnership South Asia. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Nitish. I would like your permission to put on my other hat as well, which is Steering Committee Member, Women for Water Partnership, because it is Women for Water Partnership which initiated Signpost to Bali. This entire activity on which we have been now working on for almost 6 months is because the Women for Water Partnership wanted something more from Bali than the usual World Water Forum. A World Water Forum can be just an event, or it can be a planning platform for work, for activities, for initiatives, which will take the decisions beyond the fora. How many of us have gone for global meetings, dusted our hands, met nice people, and then we just walk away? The Women for Water Partnership does not want to do that. We will go with an agenda to bring the voices of the unheard. All those people who are not going to Bali, and going to Bali, my heavens, is a very expensive business right now with a 900 euro registration fee. So we would like to see whether we take the issues which are going to be taken up, the people who are not going to be there, their perceptions, their activities, their initiatives to Bali. So with that, I would like to hand over to Marie Twerov-Cohen, who is our chair from the Women for Water Partnership. As you can see, I'm sweating, she's shivering. So we have two kinds of disasters at every end. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Marit.
Thank you very much, Kusum, and welcome all of you. I'm very delighted to be here and say a few words on at the start of this this webinar. Of course, Kusum already explained Women for Water, and for us, the World Water Forum is one of the largest water-related multi-stakeholder gatherings. And we shouldn't forget that. So they co-organize every 3 years together with the World Water Council and the host country, this big event. And sometimes there are, over 100,000 people. I mean, depending on where it is and how expensive it is, of course. But that was explained by Kusum. The forum provides a unique platform, and we shouldn't forget that, where the water community and the key decision makers can collaborate and make long-term progress on global water challenges. And having this big event and being so expensive, as Kusum already said, we want beforehand, we want the voices of the unheard also heard in these webinars, because we've done a lot. I mean, we've already done about 12 or 15, I lost track, and we're still doing more. So, and we participate in that event with multilateral organizations, political institutions, academia, civil society, private sector. So, and of course, Women for Water focuses on the importance of women and youth. And the voices of women and youth need to be heard in that forum. So, Of course, we are very thrilled that you, Youth for Resilience, have sort of emphasized the nature-based solutions in enhancing disaster resilience to create this a resilient community, because it's the community really who has to be where we focus on. They have to do the work, and that these communities are better equipped to face challenges of the climate change everywhere. I mean, as Kusum already said, you're sweating and we are very cold. So we are, as Women for Water Partnership, concerned that the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030 is seriously lacking behind. We gather with other organizations on an average of that only 12% is on track. And we're almost, well, we're 2024, so another 6 years, we are at 2030. We are convinced that better access to the labor market, access to for women to finance local activities, equal pay, access for women and youth to finance local activities, and public services such as water and sanitation and healthcare will enable and empower youth together with the women, which will be needed to implement SDG 5 and 6. So that is why we will highlight the need for inclusiveness in the World Water Forum. Inclusion of women, inclusion of youth, and we need to make a special effort. When doing this, better results are guaranteed. So I wish you all a very constructive, positive, and fruitful webinar. And I hope you will get to be as excited of the upcoming World Water Forum in Bali as I am, although I might not be there, but we'll follow it and keep you posted on the outcome of all the summaries of our webinars. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Marit. I do hope that, we would be able to get a lot of voices in, if not getting actually the warm bodies. The warm bodies are going to be a problem, but the voices are important, because yesterday I was in the meeting with the Bali Youth World Water Parliament, and what they have been saying resonates with what you have been saying here. So let us, without further ado, go to our first speaker, who is a disaster mitigation and crisis management professional who has been working for almost 1996, quite a long time. And he has been a researcher, he has been an advocacy specialist, he has coordinated several international and national projects. Professor Anil Gupta, I'm very happy that I am having you as my first speaker, because within the last probably 6 months, I've had a lot of interactions with the NIDM, and having you here especially is extremely important for us, because you are the apex body for disaster management in India. India has all the disasters that we can think of. We have just beaten you in one. We haven't had an earthquake yet. I hope I'm not sort of have to bite my tongue, but you have an extraordinary amount of expertise, an extraordinary amount of experience, which is important for us in South Asia. So Professor Gupta, who is also who has been the former head of the Institute of Environment and Development Studies, Bundelkhand University in Jhansi, that also gives me something to think about, because you have been working in teaching people, creating an entire generation of young professionals who are now, I believe, going into different programs, different organizations, and you are seeing them work as disaster professionals who are also doing something very strong for your country. And by observing you, we can also learn. Because I think the important thing of our Bali program is, let us not reinvent the wheel. We can all learn from each other and not, keep on slogging for solutions which are very easily available across South Asia. So may I invite you, Professor Gupta, to make your presentation now. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kusum. Thank you for all colleagues from Women for Water Partnership and Youth for Water Partnership. Nitish, who is always taking this initiative of bringing all the people together, and now we feel that it has already become a very good team to discuss on this very important, very critically important, I would say, not only for India, but for in the entire world, and more particularly for both Souths. So basically, the developing nations are the nations in the process of development. The water is very critical. I would say that a subject. And thanks for nice words about my previous work and interactions and engagement with various people. I have also been looking into that how we can promote cross learning, because if we look at even sometimes the smaller countries, we find that excellent examples are there of community-based initiatives or sometimes good innovations. Similarly, in India also, India, I always say that India, the water related issues in India is a highly undulating terrain. Undulating terrain, why I say, because we have excellent examples also. We have a number of good MaxSA and other awardees working for water in Rajasthan, in Orissa, many places in central part of the country. But still, if we look at particularly the women's the challenges of water, so more than half of the women population in India is still waiting for having access of the direct water supply at home, tap water. Things have improved in very recent time, recent past few years or so, but a long journey is still due in completing all this. But the having water through tap water is just one thing. It requires so many other dimensions, because maybe you can have the tap connectivity, but how many times, how much water actually you get, what is the quality of water that you get, so many things will then come into a picture. So a sustainable and holistic approach for empowerment through water sustainability, that is something uh, we need to look at from all the dimensions, and that is what we are trying. I would say that water is, while it's key to women's health, but it is also key to the women's empowerment. So that is in India. So and also everywhere, not only in India. Second thing, now what we have seen in past 3 decades, that in the livelihood dimensions also, the women's role in society has changed a lot, more particularly in rural areas and the suburban, peri-urban areas globally. So when women are trying to take leadership in the livelihood domain and also contributing to local economic strengthening, so that is also a kind of win-win situation that gives women empowerment, but also that makes more sustainable contribution, inclusive contribution to local economy. But water plays a critical role there. Second thing, that in urban settings also, lot of new researches are coming, a lot of focus is now coming on the policy domains of water, energy, food nexus. And if we see that water, energy, food nexus, the primary issues are related with the household water availability, household water related issues. And that also brings women at the center of this entire thought process. The third thing that is the direct interest of an IDM and the people who work in the area of disaster management. So often we talk about floods and drought, but I think there are new trends that is coming. We never thought of we never discussed that urban drought kind of thing. This is a new phenomena that is coming, and many Indian cities facing these kind of challenges. Now the cap town is not only one cap town. Almost all the countries we find that some cap towns in making are, even Chennai that was flooded in 2015, but 2016 and 17. It was a drought situation. It was a drinking water crisis. 2015, Marathwada, it was a drinking water crisis. And the great challenge was for the women. So these are also the issues that we are looking at. And again, the new phenomenon that the drought is a drought that we used to talk about drought as a creeping phenomena, slow onset. But now new version of drought is emerging that we call it flash drought. So maybe in just a very, very short time, just 2 days time, 3 days time, everything dries up. And these new phenomena are being noticed, and the frequency of this such kind of phenomena where the soil moisture and the water in biological system and the systems depletes very fast. So that is a sudden challenge. So if we do not invest adequately in women empowerment through all the ways, women empowerment by enabling their skills, knowledge, planning capacities, efficient decision making, and also their abilities to organize things at local level. And that is very important because in India, now women's participation in policy making has grown a lot, more particularly past 2 decades or so. And that is expanding, that is growing. Now, our women members playing very significant role in our parliaments, our statutory bodies, besides in the research domain. In research domain, if you see in Indian laboratories, in Indian institutions, we have the excellent participation of women, more particularly past few years, that has grown a lot. So that is great opportunity for us that we want to tap. My own team, Nitish, knows that sometimes we feel that we are in minority, but that is a happiness to us that the women are coming so forward, they're contributing so significantly. So this is something very important. And the last point that I would say that jointly with women for the water partnership and youth for water resilience, all the agencies which are here for this webinar series, we can also take up an initiative of identifying suitable case studies across the countries, which are worth referring for cross learning or cross boundary learning. For example, I recall that once I guided a student from Sudan, that how India's community-led water management initiatives or water restoration initiatives can be useful for Sudan and otherwise also, and the other way around also, what are the challenges in Sudan and what are the challenges in India. So this kind of things can also be taken up. And I would also suggest that sometimes we can plan that 2 countries or 3 countries, this kind of webinar. So we bring 2 or 3 countries and bring the lessons of that particular specific country, problems and lessons. So we can facilitate this kind of the cross learnings as well. So thank you very much for inviting me to share some of my thoughts. There are so many other things to learn from this deliberation, and I'll be happy to listen to other speakers to update my knowledge and to improve my activities, my team's activities in India. Thank you, and over to you, Kusum.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Professor Gupta, when you talked about you, I've learned something. I've learned the creeping onset of drought, and I've learned the flash drought, because we all knew about, the zero towns going, South Africa going into the zero water. But I would also at this point, bring this one out, if you can see this. This is quite one of my favorites, P. Sainath. Everyone loves a good drought. It does bring in the certain elements of related to corruption. Yeah, sometimes disasters are not good for many people, but they are very good for some people. So exactly. I hope that the other speakers will also pick up on that element.
So just a few seconds. So as a reaction to this, also intervention of India's Supreme Court, in India, we formed a consortium of the scientific bodies, also community and other initiatives, and we came up with National Manual for Drought Management. So that is quite scientific. And then that's implementation has really helped drought declaration much more scientific and much more acceptable rather than being only political. So just
Yes.
I wanted to share.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope that we will get a chance to read that book. I know Nitish has been extremely active. We are trying to have an activity online, not only online, but on site for South Asia with NIDM. I hope that comes in. Nitish, can I now hand over to you? And can you continue with the moderation, or shall I introduce Misaka? Who is next?
I think if you introduce Dr. Muscat, it will be very great. Then I will take over.
Okay. Dr. Misaka is a civil engineer who lost his way. He crossed the bridge from the engineering faculty to the Faculty of Social Sciences. We call it the Akbar Bridge. And he is one of these very, very rare persons who can span both sectors, the social science sector, the environment sector, as well as the civil engineering sector. So we have known each other from the time he was a second-year student in the University of Peradeniya. We have walked on many walks, we have talked many talks. But what I appreciate most is that he continues, in spite of his long experience, working with different organizations, the universities, going on to working with WWF, working globally. He always is on a steep learning curve. He is always a learner. And that is, I think, important for all of us who are professionals, development professionals, especially because I'm going to be very rude and say there are lots of people whose thinking stops with their PhD. Sorry for that if I'm offending anyone. But I believe that, Misaka is inspirational because, one, he keeps on teaching and he keeps on learning. So can I now introduce, I think that's enough of introductions, but may I ask Misaka to carry on with his speech, which I believe is going to tell you how women and youth working together. Well, I continue to be women. He's no longer youth, but we still work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam, for that very generous introduction. And I should say, like, a lot of credit for my current intellectual disorientation goes to Madam Athukorla as well. Like, she had been guiding me towards this through this transition and metamorphosis. And also, thank you, Professor Anil Gupta, for that very insightful words. And so it's an honor to be in a panel with you again. We met in May last year at NIDM when we had the opportunity. I mean, NIDM actually very graciously gave us the opportunity to conduct a training on nature-based flood risk management at NIDM Delhi. So without taking too much time, before starting my presentation, I think Nitish, you have prepared a Mentimeter, quick Mentimeter exercise. Now we'll go to that and then.
Yes, I also shared in the chat group. Yes.
Yeah, so if you can quickly answer this question without thinking too much about it, these impulsive feelings that you get when you hear the word flood. We are talking about all hazards and all types of disasters here, but flood is one of the most common ones.
There's a link in the chat. If you just click on the link, you will reach to this board. or otherwise you just join the menti.com and use this code.
We have like give just a few more seconds and then.
Yes.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we'll move on. So I think the what the picture tells us here is, please keep adding in, but if you look at the most striking sort of impressions that we get when we hear the word flood, right, the things that right at the center are obviously water is there, but if you look at the other ones, main ones, the bigger words are disaster, inundation, displacement, destruction, and so on, right? So this is where I would like to start from when we think about natural hazards, where most of our nature-based solutions are going to apply. The disasters that when you hear the name of a natural hazard, our mind always go connected, associated with a disaster, with damage, with sorrow, with suffering. So this is actually very much connected to how we perceive natural hazards, how we understand natural hazards are placed and flow through the ecosystems, and our approach to managing disasters as well. So with this, I'll turn on my PowerPoint. Is it visible?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah. Let me get it onto the show mode. Here we go. So I'm going to quickly building up on what Ms. Marit and Mrs. Atakorla and Professor Gupta discussed. I'm very quickly going to discuss about the role of nature-based methods in disaster risk reduction, which is the key theme of this seminar, of this webinar, but also focusing on the South Asian region. So one of the most common, in my work, one of the most common questions that I get is that we have a plethora of concepts, right, which are which are related to disaster risk reduction, like disaster risk management, integrated risk management, eco-DRR, community-based disaster risk management. So when we talk about nature-based methods, nature-based solutions, people ask, why is there a need for another buzzword, right? Do we need that? Is a new term, a new concept, is that what we need? So to answer this question, to deal with this question, we have to go to the very definition of a disaster, how a natural hazard transforms into a disaster, right? So this is the most common definition of a disaster: serious disruption of society causing widespread human, material, and environment losses that exceed the ability of the affected society to cope using only its own resources. This is there are many definitions, but this is the most common one. Now, if we look at this image, which is a natural hazard, a picture of a natural hazard, which is a flood in the Amazon, do we actually see any of the characteristics which is given in that definition of disaster? We don't see any serious disruptions of society or human loss, material loss, environmental losses. It looks very lush and green and very healthy, so that we all know in no time it will bounce back in a much healthier way, the ecosystem after this. So the bottom line is there is no such thing as a natural disaster. No disaster is natural. No the natural hazard turns into a disaster naturally. Natural hazards are essentially ecosystem processes, like floods, like cyclones, like storm surges, droughts for that matter, landslides. They are all essential processes. Fires, right? In ecosystems, they are really necessary for the ecosystems to survive, thrive, have those like sustenance, disturbance cycles, and so on. So controlling natural hazards is not the only path to disaster risk reduction. In most cases, poorly planned hazard control measures, like flood control measures, sea walls and so on, increase the future risks. Reducing vulnerability and protecting a natural process along with all the conventional disaster risk reduction methods that we have is actually a better approach for disaster risk reduction. And that's what nature-based solutions or nature-based disaster risk reduction is actually based on. To give an example, I don't know how many of you would recognize this picture. Is actually a flood that took place in aftermath of a flood that took place in the Libyan city of Derna in September last year. I don't have to put it into words. You can see the immense destruction just in a glance. It was widely reported in media, including this commentary in the journal Nature. And we all talked about many aspects of this flood, including climate change, right? And the social issues and so on. But in this report, if you go down like almost in fine print, you see something. There were two dams that breached, sending 30 million cubic meters of water inundating Derna. And this is actually caused this massive devastation where more than 10,000 people died in one location, which is not only the biggest flood in a location per capita destruction in 2023, but also I think in terms of like per capita destruction, it's one of the worst floods that we have seen in a long time. But it happened, one of the main causes was actually two dams breaching upstream, which were actually built to the very purpose of controlling the floods. This is a problem with the conventional disaster risk reduction or disaster control, hazard control methods that we have. They are very static. We can't change them once built based on very narrow understanding of the environment. And once the hazards or the environmental conditions exceed what they are designed for, they go from becoming protection to additional risks to the communities. Now, this is where the nature-based methods come in, or nature-based methods and nature-based solutions are partly synonymous words. They are defined by different organizations, but almost the same, like say the IUCN and International Conservation Union define them as actions to protect sustainability, sustainably manage, restore natural and modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, and simultaneously benefiting people and nature. The US Army Corps of Engineers has a more positivist definition to it, using of environmental systems to accomplish multiple purposes. So there are many other definitions as well, but in short, what it says, nature-based systems are based on natural processes. There could be existing natural systems or recreated natural systems. It should provide direct social benefits not indirect ones, like any conservation program would have indirect social benefits, but this should provide direct socioeconomic benefits and create ecological benefits as well. So co-create social benefits as well as ecological benefits. Right now, there are 3 types of disaster risk reduction measures. Non-structural methods, which we do not need any physical interventions for, focused on behavioral and governance change. Soft structural methods, which are the nature-based solutions that we talk of. These methods involve physical intervention, something on the ground, but are based on natural and nature-based approaches. Finally, the hard and gray structural methods, which we are very, very familiar with, like flood control dams, sea walls, flood walls, groins, revetments, and so on, right? They involve hard engineering structures. So we do not advocate, most nature-based, professionals involved in nature-based solutions do not advocate one type of methods over the other. But what we can say is, in a disaster risk reduction program, we can start with non-structural methods because they do not need any physical interventions on the ground. For that matter, the socio-environmental impacts of such methods and additional risk that they bring in would be lesser than the other 2 methods. I'm not saying there won't be any risk, but it would be lesser. And then consider soft structural methods, the nature-based solutions or nature-based methods. And then finally, if required, go into hard methods. But for a long time to come, it will be very difficult to do without hard engineering methods. But having a combination of these 3 types would definitely create many benefits. It's not only a technical exercise of selecting these methods and implementing them. For nature-based disaster risk reduction, there are so many principles that we should keep in mind. I'm just going to talk about 3. One is systems thinking, not just implementing this or that solution in a given locality, right? But think broadly in a systems perspective, like in a watershed, in a landscape, ecosystem, and so on. And also, as natural systems, all natural systems have inherent uncertainty, and that uncertainty is increased by new phenomena like global climate change. So we can't be, as we engineers, I'm an engineer myself, as we engineers would like to think, we can't be certain about all the environmental processes and phenomena. There is an unchangeable uncertainty. We have to embrace that uncertainty and prepare for an uncertain future. And the third principle that I would want to bring in is, if there's no community engagement, there is no disaster risk reduction. Without community engagement, you actually end up adding so on, especially women. So if you look at the concept of nature-based DRR, I'm not going too much into detail of this, but what I can say is it actually started, it is based on the initial turn to sustainable development in the 1980s with the Brundtland Commission, Rio Summit, and so on. And then it went with the introduction of IWRM, International Decade of Disaster, and so many concepts of nature-based disasters, nature-based methods developed over the time, like sustainable drainage systems, water-sensitive urban design, and so on. So this technological know-how is there. The problem is actually bringing them together with more integrated concepts, such as concept of eco-DR or nature-based disaster risk reduction. So we are lucky at actually nature-based solutions have developed to a fairly an advanced level right now. The International Conservation Union published the first global standard on nature-based solutions in 2020. They are working on the second version as well. So with this now we have a global standard to identify, to verify, and actually apply nature-based methods on the ground. It has also been taken up, the term nature-based solutions have been taken up in the disaster sector as well. The UNDRR declared that nature-based solutions can actually address the growing challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, increased frequency of extreme weather and natural hazards. And they published this very useful guideline called Word into Action Guidelines to help countries to implement the targets of Sendai framework. World Bank has also actually adopted nature-based methods in a big way in their DRR projects. As you can see on the map, they are increasingly requiring their DRR projects to incorporate nature-based methods. There are some really good nature-based solutions, nature-based method-related technical resources available. One is our own publication on natural and nature-based flood management, which is an integrated guideline based on the different stages of the flood risk management cycle and providing different practical tools for decision makers. It describes 29 structural and non-structural flood risk management methods. You can download this guide using in this site or using the QR code provided here. There are so many other technical guidelines as well, and that includes an Army Corps of Engineers of the United States has published number of very interesting, very colorful, easy to read guidelines on nature-based methods. The Oxford Nature-Based Solutions Initiative is also a very, very useful repository of information. The links are here. And last year, Ramsar Convention, the Wetland Convention, along with UNEP, published this guideline on wetlands and disaster management for wetland managers. So, nature-based solutions have taken off in a big way worldwide. But what's the situation in South Asia? South Asia is actually home to some of the earliest modern nature-based methods in the world. One good example is the East Kolkata wetlands, which originated in 1920s. It is a fascinating system where, you know, it receives the sewage of the 80 million strong city of Kolkata in eastern India. It treats it, produces fish with that nutrients, and also mitigates the flood risk of the city substantially through that wetland system. So early nature-based NBS examples in South Asia were mainly wetland-based. They always had a risk reduction angle, like flood management or public, securing public health and so on. They were supported by Ramsar-backed advancements in wetland governance. One good example is the establishment of East Calcutta Wetland Management Authority in 2005 and development of the Colombo Wetland Strategy in 2016. I think Chetika would talk about that more in a bit. There are other avenues of nature-based methods that have been developing in South Asia as well. Countries like Nepal has a long history of applying roadside soil bioengineering or soil bioengineering for slope stabilization. Some really good guidelines have been developed. World Bank supported Sri Lanka to develop for a project on vetiver-based landslide mitigation. Riverine management is another important area. The Billion Tree Program of Pakistan, conducted by the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa provincial government, but WWF my organization was also a partner to this, and they have done some wonderful work of upper watershed protection. In coastal defense, mangrove restoration projects have been, there are very successful examples of mangrove restoration which serve disaster risk reduction in South Asia. So in short, nature-based methods have actually gained, there are very old and traditional nature-based examples of nature-based methods in South Asia. We in South Asia have been pioneers of some modern nature-based solutions as well. But right now, one of the gap is although nature-based solutions has gained recent policy recognition, it's still very normative. Concrete application is still quite challenging. Applications are limited to individual projects. They lack systemic level planning in most cases. Applications are dominated by nature conservation projects. There's strong reluctance still to be adapted, nature-based solutions to be adapted in infrastructure project, urban disaster resilience, and so on. So way forward, we have to start planning nature-based disaster risk reduction at a system scale, thinking in terms of watersheds, thinking in terms of landscapes, and so on, and aligning with other bigger principles such as like integrated water resources management and so on. Very important, incorporate nature-based disaster risk reduction into engineering practice. Whether we like it or not, in the development sector, there are so many engineers. So we have to get engineers on board in this, build their capacity for nature-based solutions. So engineers work with standards, codes of practice, design manuals, and so on. So we have to actually develop in South Asia these standards, codes of practice, all the regulatory nitbits that are required in urban design, disaster management, infrastructure design, and so on. Last but not the least, engage community, right? So that's where I think we come together here, as Madam Athukorla said, bringing women and disaster professionals together, bringing women and engineers together, right? So none of these methods, none of these approaches would work if there's no community engagement. And I feel very privileged to be talking about nature-based solutions and disaster management in a forum co-organized by Network of Women Water Professionals. I think it's in our question and answer sessions, this could be far more elaborated. What is the role of women in nature-based and also youth, women and youth, sorry for leaving the youth out, in this nature-based disaster risk reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mustika. Thank you for sharing your experience, your insights, and the example you have shared, and why we need to use nature-based solution, and why it's very important to engage community, especially women and young people, to promote nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Chetika. Dr. Chetika is a postdoctoral researcher at University of Tokyo. She is a Sri Lankan environmental scientist and researcher, well known for her efforts in sustainability, particularly related to the Colombo wetland management strategy. Dr. Chetika has over a decade of experience in urban ecosystem management and has been pivotal in advocating for the preservation and the use of urban wetland as a means to achieve sustainable urban development. And last year, I got the chance to see the impact of her work when we visited with WWF Youth FGD Champions to Colombo. Over to you, Dr. Chetika.
Thank you, Nitish, for that kind introduction. So I'm so pleased to be here today and to share some of my experiences regarding how this, like so far that we saw how important the nature-based solutions in disaster risk reduction. So through this presentation, I would like to share some of my experiences, how a main city of a country is critically dependent on the natural resource that it has. So it's interesting story about Colombo wetlands. Yeah, so I have been like working in government of Sri Lanka for like about like 10 years now. So since the inception of this Colombo wetland management work, so where I got like privilege to meet intellectuals like Dr. Misaka. So moving to the presentation, actually, you might all know that Sri Lanka is a tiny island which is located in Indian Ocean, and Colombo is the main city, or we could say that financial and commercial hub of the country. Now, Colombo city is actually it's built on and around a giant a sponge or a wetland, which is called as Colombo wetland complex. Why we call it as a complex? Because it's a mosaic of wetlands, which is consisted of around 36 patches, which are interconnected with a man-made canal network and few urban lakes. So when we look at about the history of Colombo city, actually, so I would like to go back to like 15th century, because at that time, the Colombo and the urban belt of Colombo, we call it as a Colombo metropolitan region, was actually a kingdom. And during that time, there were a lot of foreign invasions were occurred in Colombo, and as well as for like entire Sri Lanka. And the history says that the giant wetland complex protected this kingdom, and especially from this foreign invasion. So since historically the Colombo wetland complex has been playing a politically, economically, as well as socially important role. So Colombo itself, a city, as like many other coastal cities, it's located in a very low-lying area, therefore naturally prone to floods. And also it's located in the downstream of one of the four main rivers of Sri Lanka. So this is in hydrologically, this area, Colombo metropolitan region, we call it as a Colombo catchment. So the wetland complex located inside this area is known as Colombo wetland complex, actually. So as I said earlier, this area is most economically and socially important area of the country, because it gives like a 50% contribution to the national GDP. And there are about like 2.3 million residents who are like permanent residents, as well as like the people who are moving to for their the jobs and all. And in 2015, the Colombo wetland complex was spreading about like 22.49 square kilometers. But when it comes to like 2021, you can see it has been reduced up to 21 square kilometers. Now, if this is the map of the Colombo wetland complex or Colombo catchment, actually. So if I divide this Colombo catchment into 3 areas, we can see the middle area contains a lot of freshwater wetlands. And also I forgot to mention that Colombo wetland complex has a diverse habitats. It's consisted with freshwater wetlands, and 2/3 of it like paddy fields, active and abandoned paddy fields, and open water bodies, and also have some woodland areas. Now this Colombo wetland complex, mainly this middle part, actually, it stores 37% of the rainwater which comes to this catchment. So it acts as a retention area for the entire Colombo metropolitan region. But since historically the Colombo being the main city of the country, actually from 14th to 15th century, the Colombo city or the metropolitan region has undergone many eco-social transformation. And the most significant transformation we could see in 1980s, actually, where that the administrative capital was shifted from the Colombo city itself, that means downtown of Colombo, towards 6 to 7 kilometers away from Colombo city, which is we call Sri Jayawardhanapura Kotte. So earlier this area was completely marshy areas, but with this shifting, this area started became like, has experienced a lot of development and developed as many residential areas. Since the entire Colombo area is like prone to like the flood disaster, so the government acquired 1,000 acres of marshes around this area, as well as the paddy fields, and they were declared as flood retention areas. So the flooding is the main like issue or the problem or like the serious socioeconomic the disaster that the Colombo is facing, and due to the climatic changes, so we could see that there are frequent floodings are happening in Colombo, as well as the frequent, like, now we get some flash droughts as well. So the devastating flood event occurred in 2010 actually was kind of like an eye-opening event to rethink about this natural ecosystem that's in the city, to safeguard the city, as well as to bring a huge mega scale urban infrastructure project to the country. So this flood event, actually, the direct cost quantified was about like 50 million US dollars. That was only the direct cost, according to the estimations. And the two main reasons were identified was why this Colombo had to face this kind of a disaster. First one is the poor conditions of the drainage system, because by that time Colombo was still having the water conveyance systems, which was introduced in few centuries ago, which is not sufficient to cater to the demand of the Colombo city right now. And also the second major reason, it was found that loss of water retention areas, especially the wetlands and the paddy fields, mainly due to unauthorized fillings and the constructions. So with this, the government started a new approach of like looking at this Colombo wetland complex and also urban flood management, especially in Colombo, where this under the World Bank funding, this huge project called Metro Colombo Urban Development Project came, especially to introduce the hard engineering structures to mitigate the floods in Colombo. But at the same time, the World Bank identified, or this project actually identified, due to this climatic, the uncertainty of climate changes, hard engineering structures are not enough to mitigate the floods in a metropolitan area. So that is why they also thought to integrate these Colombo wetlands into these flood management plans. So as a result, so institutional change was happened. Wetland Management Division was established, where I used to work in Sri Lanka Land Development Corporation, where the main government organization who is dealing with the urban flood controlling. And at that time, actually, there were very few studies have been done about Colombo wetlands. And one of the pioneers was actually Dr. Misaka. If you look at about like the wetland studies which have been done before 2013, most of the studies have been done by Dr. Misaka and his team. So this Metro Colombo urban wetland management strategy was developed, and through a very comprehensive baseline survey from ecology to water to socioeconomic, to understand what is the status of Colombo wetlands and how it needs to be managed. And also after that, many wetland-based dependent urban development practices came out. And one of the most interesting thing happened was, so earlier, especially the institutes actually, they looked at these Colombo wetlands only from one perspective, that is mainly hydrology. But with these changes, they gradually changed their perspective from from hydrology to the other ecosystem services, more into like ecosystem approach was gradually started been practicing in managing Colombo wetland complex. And At the same time, like, many quantifications were done to identify the values of the Colombo Wetland Complex, because when it brings into the policy and planning agendas. And one of the main studies that World Bank was done to try to monetize the ecosystem services that Colombo Wetlands are providing through computer modeling. Actually, we know that every time we try to value the ecosystem services, it always comes up with, like, underestimation values. So same as here, but these monetary values enlighten the decision makers to understand the dependency of Colombo City on this wetland complex. So these are some of the investigations of that study, actually. So according to this valuation, the Colombo Wetland Complex saves 15 billion Sri Lankan rupees every year from its flood retention function. And also the 50% of the Colombo city actually the cooled by this Colombo Wetland Complex. And also it does extraordinary, like a value or a function in terms of water treatment. And even this wetland complex is located in a very urbanized area. Still it provide home for remarkable biodiversity. And one of the, like, the amazing species living in Colombo wetlands is fishing cat, actually. And Colombo is the only city where you can find urban fishing cat population. And also the recreational value of Colombo wetlands is also, like, it's amazing, actually, which has still untapped significantly. And also 87% of these total wetland complex contribute for urban food security. And still there are many people who are, like, their livelihoods are depending on this Colombo wetland complex. So at the same time, this this study and try to analyze under different scenarios if these wetlands are disappeared. For example, like, 50% disappearance, like 100%, what would be the financial loss, direct and indirect financial loss to the city or the country. And it was monetized in terms of as a percentage of Colombo GDP. And the results were really amazing. And I mean, like, it's kind of like surprising to see that the economic and the social value of Colombo wetlands to the resilience of the Colombo city. But still, and also throughout this, even how much conservation efforts have been taken, like in many other urban wetlands, Colombo wetlands are still at the risk. And this was found, these are some of the results were found during the studies done in last 10 years. And 40% of the Colombo wetlands have been disappeared since 1980s due to the rapid urbanization happened in Colombo and suburban areas. And the annual rate of losing Colombo wetlands is 1.2%. So we know that in urban environments, especially in a capital city, it's really challenging to keep the natural resources with the other urban development activities. So, but throughout this history, like the government has taken some of the efforts to protect these the wetlands, which have been, like, failed, which have been, like, successful up to certain extent. So in my the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that when the city was expanding, especially this administrative boundary was the city capital was, like, shifting towards the inland of the Colombo metropolitan region, 1,000 acres were acquired and declared as flood retention areas. So in 2015, so we tried to find out or redemarcate the boundaries that the government has been acquired. And surprisingly, we saw that from that 1,000 acres, only around 700 acres were still remaining as the wetlands. And you can see when we try to put the boundary post again, most of the wetlands have become gardens or houses or, like, other, like, huge buildings. So what we understood was like legal protection is not only enough to keep these natural resources, especially in urban context. Then we tried to dig a periphery canals around the wetlands as an which is I'm not recommending, which it's a very good method because it may negatively impact to the hydrological regime of the wetlands. But at that point, in practically we had to do this kind of activity because the encroachment pressure was so high. But what we found was actually even people were tend to fill the canals because these canals slowly they are covered with these floating vegetation like water hyacinth. So it's easy for people to so try to to fill them and encroach the wetlands. Then the third approach the government practice was actually, which was quite not quite actually, which so far we have found it's a very efficient and successful practice, where that making wetlands a kind of a public places. Okay, so constructing periphery public roads around the wetlands. So why this has become a successful practice? Because due to two reasons. Because once we bring or make the wetlands kind of a public area, so people are reluctant to do negative stuff, because they are becoming visible. And if somebody is doing something it's becoming the public attention comes there. And also what we experienced was doing so, the people started appreciating the wetlands. So earlier these wetlands, urban wetlands, Colombo wetlands, of course they were in their backyard or next to their home, but nobody seen their value. But now after making them a public places, so they are interacting with these wetlands. So their interaction level went significantly high. So they started appreciating these wetlands. They started talking about these wetlands. So we have experienced this is a kind of a successful practice to protect these urban wetlands or Colombo wetlands within the city as flood retention areas, as well as to provide other ecosystem services. So basically, the wetland, one of the main wetland conservation practice is wise using, where that integrating wetland services into sustainable development without minimum, without damaging to its ecological characteristics, or I would say minimum damage to its ecological characteristics, and also having ecosystem approach rather than focusing on one function. So these are some of the models that Colombo City has applied to wise use these Colombo wetlands, integrating them with the urban planning. So created wetland parks, actually, where the urban recreation and education functions of the wetlands have connected with the wetland conservation. So far, 3 parks are there in Colombo. Which has been created and in last 10 years, and they have become a very popular outdoor places in Colombo. And another park is under construction now. And so I told you these places have become really very popular among people, and also they provide wetland education and opportunities to participate for wetland management, and a lot of educational programs are happening. And also earlier these wetlands were invisible for people. There were zero interaction, or there were no kind of a direct interaction. But we can see now a lot of students and a lot of people are coming to have their activities in the wetlands. They do volunteer activities, which is quite a very progressive trend we can see. Also, many walkways, jogging tracks have been created around the wetlands and waterways. And because these areas have become the public is gathering, small economic centers have been created to sell some local foods, the vegetables, or something like that. and so has created many livelihood opportunities. And I said that, Colombo wetlands have like a big role to play in urban agriculture. Traditionally, Colombo wetlands have been like actively used for paddy cultivation, and also there are small scale vegetable farms like associated with these paddy cultivation. So the government has put a lot of efforts to re-promote the urban agriculture, providing like a proper irrigation system, which was a major challenge for people to abandon these paddy fields. And also some of the lands acquired to the government have been leased out again for people to do the cultivation activities, because when these paddy fields are like being actively farmed, so it's a less burden to the government to manage them. So because they are farming like 2 times per day, so the people are using them, so they are naturally managed by the people. So it's also another strategy that government used to manage these wetlands without less burden or less cost to the government. And at the meantime, some governance activities also happened, like 3 new wetlands in Colombo gained the sanctuary status under the Fauna Flora Protection Ordinance, which is one of the most powerful environmental act in Sri Lanka. And also regulations were created to discharge the treated wastewater into urban canal network, because in recent past, Colombo city has started like expanding vertically. Many condominiums, high-rise buildings came, so the water quality is becoming a serious threat to the Colombo city. And because of this all dependency, the critical dependency of the Colombo city on this Colombo wetland complex, so the Colombo city was accredited or internationally recognized by the Ramsar Convention as a Ramsar wetland city in 2018. And that was the first capital city who gained this title, actually. So it's Ramsar named these wetland cities as pioneering cities, where the wetland services have been actively used in to improve the urban livability and the sustainability of the cities.
Dr. Chatika, can I request you to wrap up soon?
Sorry?
Can I request you to wrap up your session soon?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, and also like the Colombo wetlands are not providing the solutions for the current challenges that city face. In future, the Sri Lanka is experiencing actually significant demographic changes. So where that we really need to go for like decentralized urban water management. So for example, using Colombo wetlands as a decentralized systems, we can combat with the climate change impacts, and also currently most of these hard engineering structures, they are highly resource consuming, and in future we can expect the more complicated issues like population declining, reduction of city income, and abandoned infrastructure. So Colombo wetlands can be like act as a nature-based solutions, so which need to be integrated into long-term urban planning. And also, I would like to finally talk about few challenges that we experience in Colombo wetland management. One is the multiple ownership, because most of the lands are owned by private sectors, and the state-owned lands also owned by different organizations. So conflicts of interest are there. And also there are conflicts with the other urban developments. And as Ms. Saka mentioned, still there are like, like in engineering urban development activities, there's a lack of recognition was given to nature-based solution, especially in flood controlling. And also urban wetlands are always like the change in their dynamic system, so highly need the updated information, but it's a very resource consuming thing. So lack of monitoring and evaluation is another thing. And also still, the active participation of community in wetland management is not up to that level. And for successful implementation of nature-based solution, I would suggest, like in my experience, system approach is really important, because these are ecosystems, very complex systems, And for example, like the ecological succession of Colombo wetlands have created a lot of issues. I would like, earlier these wetlands were active paddy fields, but when they acquired to the government, they became abandoned, where this pond apple called like Annona glabra started. It's a vigorous invasive species in Sri Lanka in urban wetlands. So they dominated in entire wetland complex. Now most of the wetlands have reduced its water retention capacity because of spreading of this invasive species. And the transdisciplinary approach, we have to go beyond our professional, like the disciplinary silos, and think about more innovative solutions, especially when we are addressing complex urban issues, and the nexus approach. So yeah, so this is the story about how the Colombo city has been using its the natural resource as a solution to address multiple challenges. I hope you learn something from this case study, but we have come a very long way in Colombo city in terms of wetland management, but there are still more to go. So it's like a common quote that urban wetlands are pricelands, not wastelands, and Colombo is one of the prime stories which proves this famous saying. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this clear example of how nature-based solutions have a multiple benefits, not only for flood reduction, but also financial and social benefits, and how they are supporting in achieving sustainable urban development. Thank you very much. Now, before I invite our next speaker, Mr. Sriram, I also ask all the participants, if you have any questions, you can put in the chat. After Mr. Sriram, we can have a quick Q&A session before we wrap up this webinar. So now I'd like to invite Mr. Sriram, a dedicated disaster management professional working as a program associated with UNDP. He worked with the Kerala Institute of Local Administration and Town and Country Planning Department, and played a key role to co-develop with UNAP, the training material on nature-based solution, with a focus on integrating activities under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act in Kerala's local self-government. Over to you, Mr. Sriram.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nitish, and I'm happy and honored to be in this webinar of with so much of eminent personalities and kind of people from across the globe. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just share my screen. Yeah. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it on full screen?
Perfect.
Yeah. So as Dr. Misika was saying, like I'll go a little like between, I'll go back to 2010 to 2020 period when DRR was prominent before the nature-based DRR, nature-based solutions came into existence. So this entire thing that I will be narrating is part of a initiative that Kerala State of Disaster Management and Kerala Institute of Local Administration and the local self-government across the state of Kerala, which is in the southernmost part of India. So this, I will be taking it through a project that was formulated, or a process that was formulated under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural and Urban Employment Guarantee Scheme. Since all were saying about the community participation coming into picking up this entire task and kind of owning it as the key factor in kind of taking forward the NBS or the ECO-DRR activities, this particular project is based out of the communities per se. So I'll start with a understanding of the current global risk landscape. So this is a global risk perception survey that was done. This is done every year. This is the latest one that was just released in January 2024. So if you could just see the interconnections map that is given on the left side, you could see those green bubbles there. So these are the perceptions that are done, like perception that are given by the academicians, the practitioners, the people who are working on this sector, the people who are working on disaster management firm. So all these people have this kind of idea. Like if you could go back to 2023, all of them had this perceptions on global risk. Lying around the disasters, the pandemics and stuff like that. So it's an interesting document that if you could go back and look into. So if you could go into 2023, the global perceptions on the understanding of risk was more on the environmental side. Right now, if you see, there is a societal polarization happening, there is a lack of economic opportunity, there is an unemployment. So this is an interesting interconnections map that you can see. And interestingly, if you could see the same report, there is a short-term evaluation and the long-term evaluation. So in the next 2 years, people are more bothered about the misinformation, disinformation. Still, the extreme weather events fall in the second place. But then when you look into the 10-year concerns of people, the first 5 or the first 4 of those global risks come with the environmental thing in mind. That is the extreme events, the critical damage to the earth systems, the biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, and the natural resource shortages. So this is there underlying inside the minds of people is the fact. Also, this same report says that the environmental risks could hit a point of no return in certain factors like the coral reefs and all. Once it's lost forever. So these environmental risks continue to dominate the risk landscape over all 3 time frames. So now going ahead, those were the perceptions. Now coming into the technical kind of reports, all of you will be aware about the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change reports that was released in 2023. So the major points coming across IPCC report is we have already crossed or we will be crossing the 1.1 degree Celsius and human-induced global warming as at an unprecedented state. There are irreversible losses like coral reefs happening due to climate impacts. There are climate impacts on people and ecosystem, majorly on the vulnerable section of the people. And there is a resilience through adaptation measures as the only possible way thought about in terms of financing. And even if we think about the climate financing for both mitigation and adaptation, this would require some time, at least a decade time, to kind of increase that particular funding. And also, it also mentions about the acknowledgement of interconnectedness of climate, the ecosystem, the human societies, emphasizing and diverse knowledge and sustainable development. So these are the points that are mentioned in the IPCC report. And if you see on the left side, these are certain things that you could feel like you get out of your house, you could feel these things. The extreme events are on a rise. And every day you face a disaster, be it flood, be it drought, be it heat wave. So these are the everyday phenomena that you could see. There is a biodiversity and habitat loss. There is a decline in the coastal fishery resources. There is a risk to food and water security due to climate extremities, rainfall variability, and drought happening. So on standing on this platform, I would start why ecosystems are an important thing to understand before we kind of get into something like the nature-based solutions. So what is an ecosystem? So we all must have learned in our high school geography about the various ecosystems that we have. We have the aquatic ecosystems, we have the terrestrial ecosystems, we have urban ecosystem, which is a new thing, or it was there, but then now it is kind of the literature is picking up on there is a reservoir sort of ecosystem, there is a farmland ecosystem, there is a greenhouse ecosystem, there is a park ecosystem. So such kind of ecosystems are there. So these are geographical area where plants, animals, and other organisms, as well as weather and landscape, work together to form a bubble of life. So every ecosystem has its own characteristics, like how Chetika was telling about the wetlands in Colombo. Wetlands has its own characteristics. When it rains, it gets inundated. It's meant to do that. Like similarly, each ecosystem is bound to do certain things, and it will continue to do that. So now coming into a nature-based solution, as my understanding goes, it's an umbrella concept. So when I say umbrella concept, it is a set of approaches. There are challenges in it and there are benefits to it. So basically NBS are, as Dr. Misika actually said the actual definition, these are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore the natural or modified ecosystems, which in turn kind of address the societal challenges and also simultaneously provide the human well-being and the biodiversity benefits. So where do ecosystems or there are underlying ecosystem services that comes across these entire thing. So there are some provisioning ecosystem services like the medicine, the food, the water we consume, the other raw materials. There is a regulating component like the flood control, the climate regulation, the cleaning of water and air, the pollination, which is sometimes something that we completely miss. We don't even acknowledge the pollination as a ecosystem service. There's a cultural part to it, there's aesthetics to it, there is a spirituality element, there is a recreation, education, and there is a supporting function, like the habitat itself gives you kind of a happy space, the photosynthesis that happens, the soil formation, the biodiversity. So we need to see this ecosystem as a process, whether it is natural or altered. Their services can be kind of, if it is retained in its natural form, or if it is kind of allowed to be in its natural form, it could address the societal challenges by itself. So I'll pick up two things from here. Like if we take the regulating component alone from these ecosystem services, I would term that as the ECO-DRR, or the ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. So basically, we use these ecosystem services, or we kind of highlight the flood control, the climate regulation, the cleaning and water and air component, the regulating component of ecosystem, to mitigate the climate change functions or the disaster risk reduction. Yeah. So now coming into the context of Kerala, there was a huge flood that happened in 2018 in Kerala, the southern part of India. So like Kerala, it's called the God's own country, with its rich biodiversity, with its 44 rivers, perennial rivers that flows across from Western Ghats to the Arabian Sea. It's a land of greenery. It's a land where you have abundance in abundance. You have all sort of animals. You have sanctuaries. You have national parks. You have all these things, and yet it's a small piece of land in between an sea and hills on the other side. So during the 2018 floods, we had a casualty of around more than 440, 450, and we had a loss in productive infrastructure, social and cross-cutting sectors. So taking this into consideration, like the government of Kerala and the people of Kerala came across this concept. They took up the concept of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, and they kind of one thing I would like to stress in here. Kerala is also one of these states in India which has a high development index. It has high development index in terms of literacy. It has high development index in terms of its mortality rate or the gender parity. All those things, it stands like above the national standards. So also the state has its own local self-government, which is well established ever since its formation. So they came up with this idea of having a regional vision for the future development. So they came up initially with a disaster management planning. So we have around 1,000 local self-government bodies across 14 districts in the state. So we came up with the plan of having disaster management plan across all the districts, in all the local self-government bodies. So we could understand, identify the regional characteristics, the history of disasters in that area, what were the possible points where we could have conserved, where we could have restored, or how we could have sustainably managed the ecosystem. Simultaneously, we also looked into the response center state of it. We looked into formation of local self groups where they could kind of look into the emergency activities that could be done if something goes wrong again. So the major functions that these points raised was to avoid the exposure in future extreme events and to reduce the vulnerability by conserving, restore, and sustainable management ecosystem. So based out of this concept, the Kerala Institute of Local Administration and United Nations Environmental Program came up with this idea of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. So already there was this existing program on Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, as well as the Ayyankali Urban Employment Guarantee Scheme. So what they did was this would require, as Dr. Misika was saying, or as Chetika was saying, this requires a landscape approach or a ridge to valley kind of an approach if we have to kind of consider. We have high like mountain ecosystems as well as coastal ecosystems. So we need to consider it as a whole rather than looking at it as a small area. So we considered the 7 hazard themes and we started working on and also these Mahatma Gandhi. I'll just play a video so that you can get an idea. Just tell me if you can listen. The audio is there.
Natural disasters are fast becoming the world's new reality. The scientific community is predicting even more frequent occurrences of tempests, storms and cyclones, acute droughts, epidemics and forest fires as a direct result of global warming. The idea of ECO-DRR, or ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, has evolved from the time-tested principle that ecosystem-based interventions are best suited for mitigating the impact of natural disasters, both in the short as well as long term. ECO-DRR is aimed at people-centric disaster risk management, which utilizes the strength of local communities and institutions, as well as safety mechanisms inherent in natural landscapes and biodiversity. ECO-DRR thereby aims to build societies that are resilient and equipped to deal with disasters, thereby bringing a more holistic approach to the idea of disaster risk management. There is an urgent need for mainstreaming ECO-DRR by incorporating it in developmental activities and policy frameworks at the national, regional, and community levels. India's Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme and Kerala's own Ayyankali Urban Employment Guarantee Scheme provide financial security through assured job opportunities to the vulnerable sections of society. What is lesser known is that these jobs are geared towards creating sustainable and productive assets at the grassroots level. Therefore, the principle of ECO-DRR is at the core of the various activities that are being undertaken through the employment guarantee schemes across India today. And the potential for mainstreaming ECO-DRR through them is manifold. Moreover, ECO-DRR will strengthen the country's efforts in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, put forth by the United Nations at the global level. In India, ECO-DRR can be effectively implemented by introducing more scientifically proven methods for the various works that are carried out under the Employment Guarantee Scheme, such as the construction of rain pits, farm ponds, etc. for rainwater harvesting, planting vetiver and other grasses for preventing soil erosion, mangrove cultivation for shoreline protection, among others. ECO-DRR further strives for women empowerment by placing them at the center of developmental activities. ECO-DRR also aids in enhancing local livelihoods by putting into practice local wisdom and by making use of locally available resources. Due to all this and more, EcoDRR presents the best option for sustainable and holistic development and for preserving our environment and our future through a deeper understanding of nature and its processes.
Yeah. So as the video said, like, I mean, there are two schemes. One is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural. These are for the rural bodies, and there is an Ayyankali. These are the urban infrastructure. So the major motto of this entire program is to provide 100 days, at least 100 days per year of guaranteed wage employment to the most vulnerable rural household members. It needs to be implemented across all the local bodies. The 70% of work are related to the natural resource management, and the core benefits are the disaster risk reduction and adaptation to climate change. So what we did initially was to kind of look into all those activities, all those works that's been undertaken, and we kind of made a list where we could identify 46 such works that are listed in the guidelines could be kind of have direct disaster risk reduction impact. So all these interventions are on the public lands. These are watershed level interventions, which are critical for the disaster risk reduction. And most of these are community-centric interventions offering livelihood benefits as well. So these are few examples. So this was one of the scheme, Jal Subiksha, which means abundance of water. More than 40,000 wells are recharged. This was an existing scheme, so this was taken up. And this is a roof water harvesting system. These are all places towards the northern side of Kerala where drought is a phenomenon out there. So most of the things that you see will be majorly on water conservation kind of measures. So then you have mini percolation tanks. This is towards the mid part of Kerala. Gully plugging. So they take components, or they take only the elements that are there in that ecosystem, and they construct or they build from that ecosystem. Nothing new, no concretization, no grey infrastructure in there. This is a farm pond in the hilly terrains. This is a stone bound again in the these are areas where there are frequent landslides happening. So these for the step kind of cultivation, this is the method that they use. They have loose boulder check dams where conservation could be done, water conservation could be done for irrigation. So these are some examples that has resulted in these activities. These are before and after monsoon pictures. This is a renovation of a pond. This is again a gully plugging, how it kind of helps. This is a brushwood kind of dam that they have constructed. So it also acts as a barrier for other things not to flow downstream. So this is a mining quarry that has been converted into water harvesting structure. So these are all things that are done by the community. And as the video correctly says, like these are all kind of anchored around women. So they take the ownership and they kind of come together and do these stuff. This is one unique intervention. Since Kerala is a land of coconuts, like Colombo or Sri Lanka, we use coir geotextiles to kind of line the entire the banks of rivers or the tanks and the ponds. This is how it will look, and they plan vetiver in that to kind of have soil stabilization. This is how they do it. These are various stages in that. Also, we went on to the next level that we made it into a portal. Like, I don't know if I have ran out of time, but then if I can show this.
Can
Yeah.
you show it later? Let's.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
So yeah, sure. So you could go into this particular site. It's called Ariyam Katakada. This is a single local body. This was the elected representatives in his own initiative that he kind of brought all these activities onto a geo portal where you could click on a button, you could go there and kind of see what is happening where. This has the slope gradient in there. You have the point structures in there. All those things. So the EcoDRR project has direct benefits across Kerala, across national levels, and it has policy interventions. So we also took this into since Kerala Institute of Local Administration is also a training partner, we have trained different government representatives. We have, as Dr. Misika was saying, we brought in officials, we brought in engineers, we brought in work supervisors. We gave them training on EcoDRR. Agriculturists on the vulnerable coastlines were given trainings. Also, we went into kind of upscaling it into other states across India. Also, we made sure that this particular intervention was embedded into the local level disaster management plans and the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme planning guidelines were also kind of embedded this particular thing. So this also has indirect benefits like increased resilience to disasters. 1/3 of the local government have the local disaster management plans, and it has benefited more than 10 million people in the first year alone. So other than that, Kila has brought out this handbook. It's a detailed handbook which has the engineering structures that I have shown. What are the trainings that has gone into it? All those things that you could see. We have also come up with a e-course which you can take from Kila's website. The entire content is made into an e-course, and also all these documentations are done in the video documentation as well. So coming into the challenges of EcoDRR, EcoDRR is it's a time-taking process. So even if there are benefits, it takes time. There is a limited evidence effectiveness in the global south or in the urban context, which makes it kind of low policy influencing. And there are inadequate management and sustainability. There are governance concerns, like since land is of very sparse in southern part of India, it has its own governance concerns as well. So way forward, to areas to explore, there are areas where we could explore as to implementation, monitoring, funding, adaptation, and there needs to be a coordination between sectors and administrative. That's what we have worked upon. Bring together the community as well as the government together, and you can work upon opportunities. There are good international funding coming up. We need to put the hands on it and kind of build such structures. There needs to be good licensing, like how Colombo has certain things that has to be brought into India. India has to take some things from India has to be taken to Sri Lanka. There is a spillover integration method in the multi-level governance structure. So that is something that needs to be tapped. So these are these certain things that I have to say, and I will finish off with the American visual artist saying that having a land and not ruining it is the most beautiful art that anybody could ever want. So this is from this place. This is a waterfall near my home town. It's called Adrapalli. Please feel whenever you are in India, please feel it's a beautiful place. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Sriram. Dr. Sriram and Dr. Gupta, we are going to take you up on your interesting presentations. This is definitely not enough time to explore everything that we need to do. So part of, what we call Beyond Bali. Now we are doing Signpost to Bali, but part of Beyond Bali, we hope will be an on-site activity in Kerala and an on-site activity in NIDM. I look forward to really delving into this particular tier. I mean, this is just not enough time. We would like to go in depth. And as you said, make it a learning experience from one country to another. So look out for us. End of the year, we will see you in Kerala and in Delhi. So with that, I would like to, I think we are running out of time. The presenters have been very, very interesting. So sorry to cut you short, but I would like to hand over to my chair, Marit, to make the closing remarks, because I think we don't have time for questions. Marit, please put your questions in the chat, and
Yes.
we would do our best to oblige.
I think that would be the best. If you have questions, we'll try to answer them when you have put them in the chat, and then you'll get a reaction from us. This was really, really interesting, and I'm very happy that that this whole webinar could take place with all these very interesting speakers. Don't forget that we are continuing. We have a wonderful event, webinar, face-to-face and online in Malaysia that will be in April. We also will have a webinar together with the UNESCO WAP, which is the World Water Assessment Program. This will be on the call for action. Then we still are organizing the FAO, WASEC, Water Scarcity in Agriculture. They also will join us in a webinar. So these are all webinars that that we will bring the summary and the conclusion we'll bring to Bali, where hopefully we will be able to influence all the people there and to make sure that the voices of the unheard, the women and the youth, are well represented. Of course, I would like to thank all the speakers, but in particularly I would like to thank the Youth for Resilience, Nitish, for all the work you've done that this became possible. So thank you very much for that. Women for Water is very grateful to this to have you on board. So I think I now give the floor to you, Nitish.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say a quick thank you. And first, I really apologize for running late. Usually we try to end up also on time, not only start on time. But yeah, I'm really grateful to all the speakers, Professor Anil, Dr. Nasaka, Dr. Chatika, Mr. Sriram, and also all our collaborative partners, Women for Water Partnership, Global Water Partnership, South Asia, SaciWATER, especially Ms. Jaiti for your support. And yes, of course, all the participants who joined us and stayed here till now. Thank you very much. And before we end, please don't worry, we will send all the recording and the question answer also to all participants via mail, including you will get all like a feedback form. And I think Dr. Musika wants to say something. Yes.
Yeah, no, Nitish, can you, if there are any particular, so I saw a couple of questions, like 1 or 2 questions directed to me in the chat. Since we'll lose the chat after logging out, if there are any directed questions or general questions, can you send it our way so that we can send answers and we can reach out to them on email?
Sure. Thank you.
And another thing I would like to say is, of course, we were aiming mainly at the World Water Forum in Bali, but it doesn't finish there. It's beyond. I think Kusum already mentioned it. We're already continuing in our sort of organizing webinars and having fora after Bali. So please remember, we will not be gone. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.